I don't understand Toyota. So much going on this episode. We head off-road to check for clearances and to have a sneak peek at the flex we're going to get out of this terrain tamer kit. Another awning? Didn't we just buy and fix the Jayco one? We need more lift. What? Definitely going to need more height. So we finally get you some numbers on the transmission temps. We've got BMX transformations, 2 trips to ARB, a trip to Anaconda. We've got a round of MX racing. It's all happening. And we're going to reveal what we're setting the 79 up for. Whereabouts are we going? A big trip is getting planned. We'll find our fuel consumption numbers running around on the 35s. Was it worth it? Nicholas and I here before school, getting that second 30-litre water container under it. So we're going to have to modify. Yeah, modify, brand new bar. So we're going to be revisiting a place I've not been to since 1996. But we'll be doing a Simpson Desert crossing. So we headed off in 1995 in a 1988 model YN67 dual cab. We did Cape York and travelled along the top of Australia, working along the top there for a good year. Now we rolled that dual cab and did a cab swap to a 79 model LN46. And that's how we returned home to Sydney. And a few years later, Team Silver Bullet is born. So our mission moving forward, because obviously we won't be taking the Jayco on this 2-week trip, is to make ourselves self-sufficient in what we can carry in a 79. So the first idea was a base rack from ARB that gives us the opportunity to put some stuff up top. Now we're going to need shade and somewhere to sleep under. And then to complement it, we bolt on one of their awnings. This has got to come up a little bit. But the real way to check it would be to put a full length of timber on it and make sure that it's touching like the back rack too. It's done. Good guess to get it in. What are these brackets here for then? Out of all my life, my favourite aftermarket accessory has always been, always will be, the ARB air locker. And I still use them in Bullet Truck today. Obviously the new school vehicles, the Toyota have their factory lockers. So where I've got the side bracket sitting, I've got it in the middle, and I've done the same to the side where I'm going to be putting the awning, which means that the brackets center to center where I can fit them is only 1 meter. Now what we need for the awning is the distance there needs to be 75% of the length of the awning. Now that awning's 2 meters, so I'm only at 50%. So we're going to have to modify. So what I need to do, so that's where it was before, as that one is. I need to bring it out to here without moving that side rack. I don't want to take that off. Maybe you don't need to run them when you've got the awning, but I want it on there. I may not run the awning all the time. So what I need to do is drill a hole a little bit closer to the edge so that I can pick up that bracket. You can see there I can't get that to fit in there. So I'm going to mark it and drill a hole just about here. And we should have gained at least 400 mil, moving at 200 either side. You can see what that has allowed me to do. I was able to move the bracket towards the front of the car. Same at the back. I've got the covers on. So we're at 1335. 75% of 2 meters is 1500. So we're still short, but we're at the end of the roof rack and at the start of the roof rack. So we actually can't go any longer. So I'll tick that off.
What's that up to?
Happy hour, have a look.
Food.
It's all done. It's rolled out. Have a look at this. It's basically been an ARB day. I love my air lockers, like I said earlier. I've got my ARB shirt, ARB boardies, my ARB chair, under my ARB awning. Now what are we going to be sleeping in, you ask? Well, that's where that trip to Anaconda comes in. We're going to be sleeping in these bad boys. So they should roll up nicely and go straight up onto the ARB base rack. So the tank, since we fitted the 35s, the computer's saying we're at 15.9 litres per 100. But we established that the speedo's 10% out. So if that's the case, we take about 1.6 off that. Still in the low 14s. But what we're going to do, we're going to do it the old school way. We'll zero this. We'll do the tank until it's empty, come back and divide whatever kilometres we've done by however many litres of fuel we put in. So I've retired the 20, sitting in there behind Shell's commute bike. So Amelia's birthday coming up, and she's going from her 20-inch BMX up to this 24-inch beauty. And the size is actually awesome for an adult. So I picked up a second-hand GT, which I'm going to customize. The first mod I'm going to do is I got myself a set of 24-inch Skyways. Looking good. Can't wait to ride it. Still a few bits and pieces I need to do before I can. It's 9 degrees now, but it was probably 5 or 6 overnight. We've hooked this up. We haven't even started the car yet. So my automatic transmission fluid temperatures right now are 14.375 degrees Celsius. All we've got on the back is the motorbike trailer, so we've got bugger all weight on it. So we're starting the climb now. Are we getting warm? So the temps got up to 93.75 degrees Celsius. That was on the steepest part of the climb out. Before then, hitting the flat and coming down quite quickly. So the transmission oil temperatures are safe to around the 220 degrees Celsius. And anything over that, from 240 up, you start to run into big problems with failures. Now, I'm so intrigued to know what these temps are going to be like when we tow Bullet Truck and the Jayco up anything steep. Time will tell on that one, but be sure I'll show you once we've done it. And I have to say, the vibration coming from that roof rack with the wind on the freeway, we're going to have to get the wind deflector, which they offered. It must just be passing through underneath, creating a hell of a woof inside the car. So the suspension's fitted, the tyres are on. Now we want to check for any scrubbage before we commit to going off-road with it. We are quite tight there up the front. We want to check shock lengths. So this is a trusty little spot that we've tested many a vehicle. So we're off the ground. Yep, that's a lot better than the stock spring was. That's a lot better. And look at that, in the straight position, I'm nowhere near touching. I wouldn't mind knowing what would happen here at left hand down. So this is with the sway bar still hooked up. Now it gets a decent amount of flex actually. That's really, really tight. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. And look at that up travel, just clearing that mud flap. It's clearing everything. So that's really good. I'm just going to free up that ABS line. I'm pretty happy with that from a 2-inch shock. That up travel's pretty cool. So this is where back in 2016 we were actually hitting that saddle bolt. So potentially Terrain Tamer have made this longer. And I wonder if it's just the shock now limiting any more down travel. So let's have that little chat about shocks. So these are the originals, and you can see here the Terrain Tamer are much bigger shock, probably a bigger bore internally. What do you say, 40 mil longer? That's obviously because we've just put in a 50 mil coil. Now as far as articulation goes, the wheel's off the ground though, so it's the shock that's holding it. If you put a 2-inch coil in and a shock that's longer by 2 inches, you're going to pick that wheel up just as quick as you were standard. So that's just the rock crawling mentality in my brain. I know it's not always correct. For a tourer, these engineers at Terrain Tamer and all the aftermarket mobs, they've spent hours gelling a coil with a shock and a spring with a shock, and it's us rock crawlers that have rocks in our brains that go and put a 2-inch coil with a 3-inch shock. Now what we're trying to achieve there is more down travel. So these are the Bilsteins I had in the grey 79 for the testing. Now you can see that that's another 50 mil longer than the one we're about to put in. So almost 4 inches taller than the factory one. So where I'm getting at with that is we've just put a 2-inch coil in and we want to put a 4-inch shock in. And what that does, it limits your up travel, but it gives you a bit more droop if it's applicable. If you've got the proper radius arms and you're not running a sway bar, there's a lot of variance. Because we've got the sway bar hooked up, that might be limiting. But let's measure that shock. So we've got around the 520 washer to washer. And the full extension of the front shock to where we measured it is 520. But don't forget we had the issue of this stretching. If the shock was any longer, we would have to modify these. So taking the shock off and measuring it, not hooked up, confirms that the shock there is what's limiting any more down travel. Now with the rears, so what we've got there in shock length is 640. So that's center of bolt to center of bolt. That's the wheel off the ground. Now the extended length of that rear shock is 660. And you can see the bottom mount is probably only about 80 mil from where it would be at ride height. By measurement, there was still another 20 mil of down travel. Now, I made a point of looking at that rear spring saddle and we were missing the bolt. But if you can see here towards the front, I didn't see it at the time, the front one is actually binding up on the bolt. And that's why in the past we've made longer saddle brackets, the way you can see here that we've done on Bullet Truck. Back to this wheel now and whether or not it's going to hit. Yeah, I think I'm going to come back at left hand down and just see if that touches. That's hitting way up in there, isn't it? So it was hitting this. Oh, it's hitting the steering arm. We need more lift. So it looks like the main hitting is that point there. That's where I thought it would hit. I didn't like the shape of it anyway. I needed a bit more off it, but I was limited by that bracket, which it's now hitting. So if we can get rid of this wire and put it on the front of the bracket. So we've got the electrical wire out of the way. All right, we'll do the same on the other side. Touching the plastic, at least all that metal's now gone. That there's a bit of a worry how taut that is. I'm gonna have to find some way to extend them. What was in the box, Mum? Any guesses? April 2024. Can't get any fresher. There it is. The all-important question is, will the Roadrunner 6 horsepower low mount high speed winch fit in the ARB bar? So between chassis, so we've got 680 and it looks like it's in the center of the fairlead. We've got a height around 250 and a depth of around 180. And if the winch doesn't fit, looks like we might have to get a worn winch. So we'll pop past and visit Bullet and get the dimensions of that winch. Saves me getting on my hands and knees under this thing. See why it was easier for me to measure on Bullet than it was on the 79. Quite hidden there on your hands and knees, but this is quite open. Yeah, I'm still not used to that white bonnet. Alright, so what do we got? Now, unless I start modifying that brand new bar and drilling holes in different places to have the winch offset, I think we're going to be in trouble. So the height's okay, and I'm sure the depth's going to be okay. Just. What do they say? Back to the drawing board. And I think too, from memory, on the little jewel cap that we built up, fitting one of these Roadrunner 6 horsepowers in that, I had to offset the holes from memory. But that was a TJM bar. You can see with the Roadrunner high speed one, we've got a bigger motor, so that takes up quite a lot more room to the free spool section. I'm actually pretty sure, so we've got 1150, so that's 575. So we've creeped that across a little bit, but if you look inside, you can't see, but the winch isn't centered to that fairlead. I only put that in the center so it didn't look odd. But remember, this was only ever temporary. But I think even this winch between my chassis rails, the drum is not in the center of the chassis rail. Now, while I think it was pretty cool to have that Roadrunner off-road winch under that 79, so what we'll do is we'll either keep it as a spare, but I've had plenty of offers that people have wanted to buy the winch on the cradle to suit a 79. So time will tell with that one. So I don't want to risk having to modify too much stuff. ARB have helped me out heaps with the parts that I've gotten so far. And I feel it's only fair that we marry up the ARB bar with the worn winch. So we've got 33.2 kilos of accessories that we're going to bolt into that ARB winch bar. Before Roadrunner Off-Road, we used to use worn winches ourselves for many years, decades. We had a couple of high mounts and then the super quick 9500. Okay, so we're back. A couple of little changes since last time. What I've done is I've taken that bolt out, and you can see here we've passed that point, yet we're still not hitting that bolt. What's going on there? We've also freed up this ABS line. So we've got a bit more slack in that, and yeah, a longer shock. Hopefully we get a bit more down travel out of it. A couple of people that have asked. So this is a neg 50, and there's the rope rail. So we've got not quite a fist this way. I've got big hands, but we've at least got 50 mil clearance on the 315. So for those of you that were asking about the 33s, you'll have clearance. Now if you've done a track correct, and you're not running a 0, if you're running maybe a neg 12, you're probably only going to be 12 mil further out than this. So there's your gauge. I think you're going to have plenty of clearance on the rope rail on any of the factory trays, the steel and the alloy. They have them in pretty much in the same spot. Bit of a funny story. If you remember a couple of videos back, we changed that top bracket on the airbags, and I mustn't have put one of the cable ties back. This guy here touched the exhaust, and yeah, I went to put air in to go to the tip the other day and it wouldn't take. The lesson there is always make sure you put back what you take off. And I guess the other lesson too is that I allow, normally with an airline, I'll run it as much as I can to have spare line. So in this case I was able to cut it off and rejoin it without replacing the whole line. So always leave your airlines a little bit longer, but not too long that they're going to get in the way. Now you can see how far down that parabolic's gotten. So it's touching the rubber there. I'm going to measure something. So we definitely have gained some droop here. And the measurement we took last time, I think it was 640, but then the shock fully extended was 660. So there you have it. Now that wheel's still on the ground. So I really need to experiment with picking that wheel up. So let's take that measurement to see how much extra down travel we got, because we utilized that whole front shock last time we were here. We've got an extra 20 mil of droop on this front left wheel. Now I feel if I disconnected that sway bar, that I would actually get more flex. But that's not what this test is about. So I feel as a tourer, family 4 in there, we're gonna have swags on the roof and we're gonna be heading into the desert. So this is as capable as we're gonna be going in there. Safe for the highway with the sway bar in. So I feel this is gonna be capable enough to take on the trip that we're doing. There's another thing that I've changed, and I had this on the grey 79. We never really got round to getting it on the white one. Now this isn't a sponsored product, this is a paid for product, and I rate this as the best steer damper that I've ever used in my whole life. What it did to the grey car, and we used to run around with that car with the sway bar off, and as the components started to wear out, we put the Fox damper in and it transformed that vehicle. So I put it under this one, but the Terrain Tamer one that came with this kit, it worked a lot better than the factory one. Chalk and cheese it was. Just the wider shoe, it takes any play out of the steering. Bear with me a minute, I've got one more little experiment to do. Now that experiment is to run a longer shock in the rear. So I've found these Terrain Tamers to be so comfortable on road. They've handled everything I've thrown at them so far. So this exercise is just to see if we do get any more down travel out of these amazing parabolics. Now these are the Rancho RS9000. They're the 9-way adjustables. And again, not a sponsored product, a paid for one. I've been running these since the late 90s. I remember the announcer at Tuff Truck, as you didn't really have many extras to mention on the Silver Bullet.
Shows you what you can do with an older vehicle. 82 Hilux, this one. Only a 2.2 litre diesel. It's got a full body lift, chassis lift, drop shackles, twin air lockers, Rancho shocks. And look at Denny driving it up the ridge.
But he did mention Rancho shocks. They were the good old days. In the foreground there, you see an old friend of mine, John, making sure that Michael's got his seatbelt on before we take off. John's no longer with us, but I regard him as the best driver I've ever had the pleasure of driving with, against, and learning from. Rest in peace, old friend. Bit of footage here of my stretched 4Runner, one of my favourites. also running Ranchos. But I've run them ever since, on whatever vehicle I can get my hands on. They're one of the only brands that'll give you good long length shocks. Now, just to make the point, and it's a very important one, I'm not recommending that anybody do this. The kit that Terrain Tamer supplied and will sell to the public is a kit that you bolt in and don't touch it. We'll be going across the desert running the Terrain Tamer kit, and I'll be doing a review on that suspension on that big trip. Now, all this stuff in the interim is just for me, and I've been dealing with John and Kirk at 4-Wheel Drive 1 for many years, and John's still going with the business, so for your Rancho shocks, give them a call, and they know their stuff. I don't think we've gained any more actually, so there you go. That's as much as you're gonna get. Again, so what that shows you is the engineers at Terrain Tamer are much smarter than I am. Their kit, purpose built to give you the maximum out of a 70 series, or any other brand they make for. We just got to be happy with it, and this is how we're going to be touring this awesome country of ours. Now, I always felt that the straight radius arms on the grey 79 flexed better than the white one, which had the bent radius arms for the DPF. And as you all know, these ones are back to a straight radius arm. I just feel that they move a bit freer. So that box damper clears with ease. Now, the only untested thing on this vehicle are these tyres. These are the AT52s from Kumo. Beautiful square looking sidewall. They're an all-terrain. So I've got a few minutes up my sleeve. I'm going to air them down. I need to see and feel what they will look like and feel like at 18 PSI on some of these rocks behind us. We've got the fronts down to 18 and there's not much of a bag yet. Now, we've got these on the 300 and the 300 got them first, but they're on an 18-inch rim. And when we went to Tamworth, we aired them down and they bulged quite nicely and they were very comfortable. Now, before we air the backs down and give us a little bit less height underneath, there's something I need to address. So you see those U-bolts there? What will happen is they'll grab the first rock, they'll wreck the thread or they'll bend the thread. And then we're no chance of getting the U-bolts off if we ever need to, bar cutting them. So what I'm going to do, I've got the cordless grinder here. I'm just going to nip those threads back up just under the nut, because that is the spot that all 70s hit. What I'll do too is I'll check that the nuts are tight. Since the suspension's only been put in not long ago, you got to check it every now and then until you find that they're not loose at all. So please join us in next week's episode where we'll show you how these Kumos go on the rocks. Time to reveal those fuel figures. So we've done 581.1 kilometers. Computer's telling me 14.6 liters per 100. Oh, I'm happy enough with that. We'll add the 10% on, and then we'll divide it by however many liters we need to put in. 13.4 liters per 100. You know what? We're on 35, and it's not costing us that much more. It might be like 1.5 liters per 100 was probably the best I was getting on the 285s. All right, the brakes are that bad. I've allocated myself 20 odd minutes to get what Terrain Tamer sent out. The brake proportioning valve razor. Now, I've spent a few minutes under here and I don't actually see a proportioning valve. So I contacted my Toyota guru, and guess what, everyone? There's no proportioning valve on this model. What? This is a ute. It has loads in it and it's unloaded. It needs a proportioning valve to distribute the right braking to the back of the car. I don't understand, Toyota. So that's probably 300-400 kilos of firewood for us for home for the next week or so. The back did come down, but the brakes don't feel that much better or any different. So maybe it's just the tyres, the bigger rolling diameter. Being an auto, maybe that's as good as the brakes are going to be. So I really can't feel any different. So the problem is I did the suspension and tyres pretty much inside of a couple of days. So I didn't really drive with the smaller rubber on the suspension and notice any difference in braking. We've got to find another way of testing out these brakes. So anyone out there with one of these 4 cylinders, you've put bigger tyres on, if you've done anything to the brakes, please comment down below. I need help. So the kids' first point score at our club, MX round 1. Now we're used to Amelia and Nicholas fighting it out between themselves for first and second. Both of them over the last couple of years have podiumed at every round. Now this year, Nicholas's first run in the A grade with the 65s. Now there was only 3 of them in his class this round. Some older boys, more experienced and quite quick. But he held his own. He picked up 2 seconds out of the 6 races and obviously finished 3rd overall, but taking points into the championship. And Amelia's first time racing in 85, 4 in her class. Now these guys all came up together from the 65. But she did really well until poor Millie had some bike dramas. The boys here in the pits trying to get it together. I'm out marshalling on one of the barrels. The muffler had broken away from the expansion chamber. So you can see here it was only just long enough to reach rather than go over. So what I did, I had a bit of rubber hose which I used to clamp it together with 2 hose clamps. So that's failed now after a year. And you can see here, another nice bit of gear, but it's got a flared end and it'll slip in probably a good 20 mil, and then I'll whack a hose clamp on it. So that should never come apart. While Millie got the new muffler, Nicholas got new wheel bearings and a front tyre. And poor Millie, she was doing really well, but obviously the noise was really disturbing her and maybe the performance of the bike. She ended up coming off early one race when she would have got a guaranteed third. My bad, I guess. I take care of the bike. She picked up a 3rd place in one of the races, and her posture and technique are a pleasure to watch. Now I hope you enjoyed this video, and as you can see, so much more moving forward. We're going to be doing a trip in the swags as a test before we do go into the desert. Make sure we can get all our food on board, our clothes, see how this roof rack travels. We've still got to put a wind deflector on it. We're coming up to 10,000 subscribers, so if you guys can help me out, subscribe, like, ring that bell, comment. That was pretty good there for an all-terrain. And as always, thanks for watching.